Okay, so your next challenge was the season against Melton in the final. You want to talk about that Melton game?
Melton,
Toss of the coin.
Seems. I'm glad you agree with me. That was at home too, which made it a bitter pill to swallow. So they batted on the Saturday. You might have the stats, but they didn't make all that many.
200.
200 was it? But for some reason, the Preston track just became a shattered mess, where it went straight along the ground pretty much for all of the Sunday.
Yes.
And again, 200 if they bowled straight, which they did, 200 became virtually impossible because you couldn't play any shots.
Yeah.
Unless you just slogged. So and got away with it somehow, which you wouldn't have been able to get away with because the ball just didn't bounce. So
couldn't strike.
But that was difficult to swallow. That one.
The winnable one was Caulfield. We're in a winning position, weren't we, the following year?
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that game?
For some reason, it was a one-dayer. It must have been washed out or something, was it, on the Saturday? They made about 140.
If you remember, there was a hole in the covers, and it seeped onto the pitch. And they called play off.
Yes. So I think they made about 140, something like that.
Yep.
Yep. And we came in. I was opening with Ravi then. With who else I can't remember.
Dave Robinson.
Dave Robbo, was it?
Yeah.
And Rowan was 3. And we absolutely had it on toast. They were cruising at 30 odd each, 30 to 40. And I think Caulfield had just about given up at that stage, but then both got out, which was most unlike them. And then we struggled for the rest of the day and just fell right away. And lost it by, I don't know, whatever. So
8 runs.
8 runs, was it?
Yeah. We had 13 to get off the last over. We did fight back. Do you remember who put on a few at the end there?
Oh, probably you, was it, Ron?
No, Scott Harvey and myself. Yeah.
Was it? Yes. Yeah. So
we put on 30 and we got to within 13 off the last over. And
right.
Anyway.
So there were 3 losses in a row. Just got worse and worse, and I found that very difficult to deal with.
Having said that, they were a good side. They had Doug Gott and some very good players. The Harper brothers.
Very good side, but we still should have won that game.
Should have.
That was absolute lay down.
A personal highlight would have been making a century in 1987 against Baldwin Killer. Do you recall that innings? Playing for Preston?
No.
He'd be the only bloke in the world that doesn't remember his centuries.
That'd be right. I don't remember against Baldwin. I made 100 against Kew, my old side.
Not playing for Preston?
Yes, I did. That's one I do remember.
Well, maybe that's the one you're thinking of.
Maybe.
Doesn't matter.
Maybe you've got it, yeah. I do remember that one because in my first year we played, because we were in the same northern zone, so we played Kew. Preston played Kew every year. First year when we played against them, it was at Kew, and I found it very difficult because I'd coached all of those boys at Kew, and they had a bit of a chat to me when I went out to bat and got in my head, and I think I just got a soft cock dismiss, hit it straight to cover or something like that, which afterwards I was pretty annoyed about letting them do that to me. So the next year I was pretty determined to make them pay, so that next year I made 100 to make them suffer.
Tell us, in summarising your 5 years at Preston, you had great support from your then wife, Anne. I have great memories of Anne barracking from the grandstands and supporting us to the hilt. She was a very good support for us. We had some wonderful characters, we had some wonderful players. Do you want to individualise some of those players that really stood out? Before you answer that, Steve Harvey has said to me recently how much extra time you put into his development and encouraging him to go off to North Melbourne, and he's very grateful for the coaching that you provided, individual coaching and support you gave him. There's probably others that we're not aware of. Do you want to talk about those?
Yeah. Oh. No, you forget those things. When I last saw Steve, he reminded me, and I'd completely forgotten when he did go to North. I used to go and spend a lot of time with him one-on-one to keep improving his batting so that he could make it at district level, which he had a good time there. So, but you tend to forget all those sorts of things. They were great blokes, and as I said, I feel very privileged. Not that I see them all that often, but when I do, there's still that great camaraderie between so many of those blokes and myself who found it hard to some of them to lift their standards, but the proof's in the pudding as to where they got as a team and became the most successful team in the comp because of their willingness to work hard. And
I'm sure all those players, and I know they all believe that their own performances individually and the club's performances improved enormously in that 5-year period. The disciplines, the structures, the predictability, the known roles that we all had. Everyone seemed to have a role and were happy to play a selfless role.
Including yourself, Ron.
But there's no doubt people like Dale Carpenter and others, Ashley Robinson, the young players, Jeff King, there's no doubt they would have progressed significantly in that environment because it was very team oriented, it was very selfless, and I think the credit has to go to you for that. And there's no doubt the premiership the following year after you left was largely attributed to the structures you put in place. So tell us about when you left Preston. I believe you took a couple of years break. You had a pretty intense cricket situation up until then, and you took a year's off, and then you came back and played for Q again, Captain-Coach Q again.
Yes.
How did that happen?
Well, the 5 years, as I said, took a lot out of me at Preston as we got beaten in the finals each year, and as I said, each year probably we should have won, got closer to winning each time, which upset me a bit. And so I must have been, I don't know, 42, 43, something like 41 I would have been. So that was enough. I think it was time to retire because my own probably batting was starting to fall away a little bit. I'm not sure. I wouldn't have any idea actually. So I retired. I retired after the 4th year when we got beaten at Melton, I think it was. And Dick and Dave convinced me to give it a crack for another year, which, as we said before, we should have won, and that finished me right off. So I needed a break, and I had 1 or maybe 2 years off. How I went back to Q was that I was driving past, must have been a Tuesday or a Thursday night, from somewhere, and I thought I'd just drop in and watch how they were training, see the drills and all that sort of thing, see the intensity, whatever was happening. And I was sitting in the car park in the car, and a couple of the old people, can't remember who it was now, went past and recognised me, and so I went in and had a couple of beers, and the next week I played, I think, the last 2 games of the year or something like that. And
couple of beers, you said?
Couple of beers,
yeah.
Maybe a couple more. And then the next, Mossy was there, Jeff Moss was their captain-coach, and so I took over the next couple of years again, and Mossy stayed on, which was great. We had a couple of good times together on the field, and then I retired again.
Well, after that, the next year you were appointed Captain-Coach of Malvern. How did that happen? Given that you were retiring.
No, I firmly had enough again, and then their president, a guy by the name of Hayden Carris, whom I didn't know, rang me out of the blue, and Melvin were having a few ups and downs and sort of discipline problems and that sort of thing with some of their players. So he asked me if I would go there and hopefully straighten things up a bit. So,
and did you straighten them up?
Well, yeah, we made the finals that year. We had quite a good side, but there was a lot more structure and discipline, and everything worked well there for that year. But I bailed out at the start of the second year, and that was the definite end.
Why did you bail
out? There was one or two players, one who now unfortunately has passed on, who not so much him, but his offsider, who thought he could play and he couldn't. But putting pressure on the president and whatever to free things up a little bit the way they were used to.
Oh, okay.
Which I wouldn't have a bar of course. So
stuck to your guns. Good on you.
Yeah.
So you were then appointed non-playing coach of North Melbourne.
Oh, that's a few years later.
You took a break after Melbourne.
When was that? About 95, I suppose. When that was, I got no idea. And then North Melbourne approached me again I went there in 2000, so it must have been, the winter before or whatever it was. They'd wanted me to go there back in the 80s, but they could not provide me with the basics that I wanted to and required to give them a chance of winning games, so I didn't go. But in 2000, my old team was the only district club I wanted to coach.
Right. Were they on their main ground when you came?
Yeah.
No.
Still, such as it was, terrible condition.
Liam Pickering was there?
Pickers was my captain for the 3 years.
How'd you get on there?
Oh, Pickers is a good bloke. Yeah,
right.
Good bloke, but was at the end of his playing days because his hip was completely stuffed from footy, and so he couldn't move. So made it difficult in one-day games when you got one bloke who can't move. But the boys were very good.
So you had 3 seasons as coach. Did they make the finals in any of those years?
Yes. We made the semis, whatever it was called, 1 year, which is the only time in the last 60 odd years they've made the finals. That same year, the seconds made the grand final. Were beaten at the Albert by Melbourne, who in that Melbourne second side, I think there were 3 or 4 players who went on to play state cricket, and one of them Test cricket, who's Peter Neville. So they had a fair side, and so it was no disgrace to get beaten by them in the grand final.
Yeah.
But I can't even remember who we played in the semi-final. But yeah, so that's the only time in the last more than 60 years.
Well, that would have been a source of satisfaction for you for a battling club. Let's be fair, they've been a bit thin on the ground administratively over the years, and to get some success. Yeah.
True.
Now at Greenvale.
Yes, unfortunately.
Anyway, following the end of all that, you've 4 sub-district clubs in North Melbourne, 15 years basically. You should be life member at North Melbourne. 15 years.
Yes, I think their qualification used to be 15 years, but 12 and 3 should make me, but I'm not a life member at North Melbourne.
That's unless it has to be continuous.
I don't know.
Okay, well that's something to maybe ask them down the track. Anyway, at the end of all that, wonderful contribution to coaching and playing, you continued your cricket with a group called the Centurions. of which you've been president for the last 5 or 6 years. Tell us a bit about the Centurions, Neil.
Well, the Centurions was started by yourself, give yourself a pat on the back, Ron, and a couple of others in about 1992.
One other, Graham Templar.
And then what about Pecky? Oh, he's a big supporter.
Graham Templar.
And then I came on board a few months later with a couple of others, and we've been members of the Centurions ever since.
Who are they and what they do?
We made our first, well, it was a touring side, and any money we made in those days for a long time, we had fundraising dinners and balls and that sort of stuff, went to the Asthma Foundation, which was a pretty good cause to be involved with. And apart from playing a number of games here throughout the season, even up as far as the Easter competition, the Bradman competition up in Sydney, Barrel, and other grounds around there, we toured every 4 years to England, and our first tour was in 1993, which has a lasting memory with me. One, because it was the first time I'd been back playing in England for quite a few years, and also 4 of my Preston boys went on that tour.
Yeah, tell us about the fun you would have had with Dale, Brian Duggan and Peter Carpy Cawthorne.
And Dave Norris.
Oh, and Dave Norris.
Dave Norris. There was the 4 of them, so there were 5 of us from Preston on that tour, and every time I see them, one of the first things they raise is the best time of their lives, all 4 of them, which was that month in England. Fair to say that we perhaps can't go on with anything to do with the nightly activities, but they were long and hard for all 30 days, but we played 14 games, and I think it was 13 games. I think one was washed out, and we won 11 of them. So,
is there any truth that Dave Norris left a chocolate and a rose on the Campbell scorer's pillow?
This is true. This is true. The first night we were in a hotel in London, and the scorer from Camberwell was not getting on particularly well with the president, who was our captain of the tour, who was also at Camberwell, and Dave Norris, in his usual humorous fashion, put a rose and some chocolates on his bed, which I'm not quite sure whether it went down all that well, but it was certainly very humorous for the rest of us.
Just for the record, it's fair to say that the Centurions played cricket in England, Germany, on the Berlin Olympic Oval.
The next year, yes.
Ireland, Dublin,
Vanuatu,
and Barrel. So it's done a lot of travel.
Yes, yeah. Vanuatu, one of the good times of that, because we spent a week there coaching all the kids and played, can't remember, 2 or 3 games in conditions which were almost unimaginable. It was so humid, but not so much hot, but the humidity. But hopefully we did a lot of good over there in coaching kids and giving out some equipment and stuff like that. It was great.
In fact, we brought out Andrew Mansali as a 16-year-old boy. Gary, surname I can't remember, Colonel Sanders, put him up for a month or so. He's now the cricket coach of the whole East Zone of the cricket, which covers New Caledonia, and is doing a terrific job.
He's a fantastic young fella, yeah.
And raised 100,000, in excess of 100,000 for asthma over the 20-year journey. Anyway, so enough of that. Neil, looking back on your cricket, wonderful memories, both club cricket, district and sub-district, cricket social with Centurions, serious social cricket with Centurions. What's been the highlight of your whole cricket career?
Personally, probably developing a brain. Like most of us, I guess we wish we had our 30-plus-year-old cricket brain on a 20-year-old body, because for many years didn't really know what I was doing. You just did things on natural ability. But my greatest pleasure and forever lasting one is seeing so many of the boys. Harvey's just for one or two simple examples, but through all the clubs, just watching how much they improve and become good players.
Jeff King as well went to North.
King, just another one. But through all the clubs, the young fellas who eat up their cricket when they know what they're supposed to do and they have some direction, and to see how they become not only fine cricketers but fine men as well. That's the
good point.
That's my my lasting memory of hopefully some good things that have.
Is it fair to say then that your cricket coaching was as much about the cricketer's character development as well? Is that a fair?
It's very, in my view, it is very rare to have a successful team without solid, good character throughout the whole place. You can do it in an individual sport. You can perhaps be a bit of a jerk or this or that or whatever, or a pompous prick, and be successful. But that is very rare to have in a team sport. You just can't have those sorts of things. So the development of the character is just as important as the development of the actual skills of the game, in our case cricket. Otherwise you don't have success.
How do you see the Past Players Association that Lee has done a wonderful job setting up? How do you see that adding to Preston, and how do you see your involvement in it in the future?
Well, firstly, it's one of the most, I would say, given just what I said, is for a club to have ongoing success, it is critical that you have a strong past players association, for want of a better term. There are so many clubs whom we would all know, and football as well, AFL football. There would be none of them, I think, who do not have a strong past players affiliation that are successful clubs, because there is no tradition, there is nothing to look back on, there are no past expectations for you to have to live up to. So for what Lee is doing and whoever else is helping him, it's one of the most important things that I see as far as the continued strength of a club, in this case Preston. So absolutely critical. And you look at so many other clubs who are just getting on the bandwagon now too, and trying to bring back old players to the club just to build that established tradition and so on, and success. So it's absolutely critical that it continues.
Sure. Now, I've seen the bloke on TV do this to conclude these interviews, so I just say to you, Killer, congratulations on a wonderful career of cricket and your contribution to Preston. Now you can go and sign the glass over there.
Fine. Thank you.